Hello, 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 everyone. It's wonderful to see so many faces here, so many familiar faces, so many faces from Berlin and outside of Berlin, from all over Germany, as well as Europe. Today, we have a very, very interesting event, very, very sensitive topic, but something it's time to talk about and something it's time to not be ignorant and turn a blind eye towards. My name is Ola Jongerius. I'm a diversity inclusion training consultant. And as you know, because of the current events in the world and specifically in the USA, the topic of diversity inclusion had become even more prominent, even more important. The reason why I started this kind of events is that not only because of what happened in the US, but because of the reaction of people around the world. I see a lot of my friends going to protests. I see a lot of my friends posting LinkedIn tearful posts about how they feel about it, how horrible were the things happening in the US. And I see a lot of people trying to jump on this train wagon and trying to express their opinion. And I thought that I'm a person who works in this area that has no right to talk about it because I have not had these experiences. At the same time, I thought this issue is not the issue of US only. It's the issue around the world. And what made me think is that why we're talking about discrimination, racism is only US problem. It's not US problem. Exactly the same things are happening in Europe and in Germany specifically. And with this in mind, we decided to have this event today to talk about a very difficult situation, talk about very difficult stories, and shed some light on a very sensitive topic. So, and it will be very strange if a white privileged woman like me will talk about this. So I have two fantastic people who agreed to share their stories. And with this in mind, we're going to have a bit of explanation in terms of terms, as well as looking at statistics, the history of migration in Germany, and so on and so forth. We have over 120 people sign up, but I see that most people are here that wanted to be here. And I would like to go more into how we're going to proceed and what is going to be the structure of the event today. So this is the event, as you can see, it's part of the 10 series of events that are going to be happening in the next 10 weeks. It's the first one. So diversity inclusion is not just about racism, it's a lot of other topics that you could look at every week, every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. It's all free and all donations are going to go to companies and organizations that support diversity and inclusion in Germany. So if you'd like to support that, you can purchase another ticket and send a donation there. So as you may know, why am I saying may? Black Lives Matter, it's a movement that's happening in the US. Just a bit of explanation, we're not going to focus on US at the moment, but it's a very, very good trigger that prompted this event. But we're going to talk about Germany today. I occasionally going to move my eyes around because I still have to admit people who are not as good as you being on time. And I would like to establish some rules for today. Since it's a public event, decided that it will be very, very important, it will be paramount to establish safe space for both the audience, myself, and the speakers. And it was paramount to disable the chat. Since it's a public event and I don't know what kind of event, what kind of people are going to be part of the event, it's one of the first steps to do that. It's not the way to silence people and silence their opinion because every opinion counts, but just to create a safe space. You are able to ask questions through Slido. That we'll try to answer at the end of the presentation, the end of our panel discussion. But if your question is not asked, we'll have time after the official event, after the official part of the event, where you're going to be able to unmute yourself and ask any question that you have on your mind. So the first thing, I just want to talk a little bit about the agenda, how we're going to proceed today. So the first one is we're going to ask, how are you today? Because just to set a bit of a mood, to set a bit of understanding and expectations from you. And then we're going to talk about the term codes, being colorblind, and the types of racism and types of attitudes towards racism. Then we're going to mention white privilege and talk about German statistics. So I'm going to cover this part. And the second part going to be about stories from two of our speakers and a panel discussion. And with some luck, bearing in mind time, we're going to go into question and answers. I will have to be very honest with you, and even though I'm a diversity inclusion trainer, I have to place a disclaimer. I'm not an expert in this topic. I'm not an expert in this topic. I'm more of a moderator because, as you can imagine, being a marketer, you cannot be a digital marketer and this and this and that and that and growth hacking and so on and so forth. So I have brilliant people with me today to share the stories and to support you with all your questions. But all my friends and all my diversity inclusion people, all my friends mentioned that this is a very dangerous event to have because, you know, one wrong term that you use, you offend so many people, you're going to get in trouble or your career ruined. So please, please, I ask for your support, I ask for your understanding and for your curiosity, because I learn with you just like you are learning with me. So let's jump into that. Please go to slido.com and use hashtag inclusion Germany. There you will be able to see, a simple question. How are you feeling coming to this session? You can answer with just one word. You can answer with several words, but ideally with just one word. How are you feeling coming to this session today? So some answers coming through. Thank you very much. Take your time. Interested, curious, open-minded. Thank you. Tired, curious. Curious is a very, very good word to have. Interested, so the bigger the words, the more answers submitted. Tired, yeah, a lot of us are tired nowadays. Hopeful, me too. A bit nervous. If you're nervous, imagine how am I today? And our speakers, ready to learn, open-minded. And I have to be honest with you also and say that I was overwhelmed by the response because I posted the event on Tuesday and it was less than a week and so many people messaged me, so many people submitted the questions, so many people wrote because I think it's time to talk about it. And, you know, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge because people who want to learn, people who are ready to learn are not part of this kind of events. So, but you could be the ambassadors getting into the topic and spreading the knowledge, because it seems to be there is a lack of knowledge in a sense, and we are afraid and we try to avoid something that we don't know. It's normal. Happy to hear about the topic, motivated, ready to learn, open, wonderful. Thank you all so much for your answers. We can continue. So, the first thing I would like to discuss with you today is a term called colorblindness. You probably heard a lot about the terms when you see, well, I don't really see race. Everyone is exactly the same. Black, white, brown, everyone is the same. I care about the personality. I care about you as a human being. I only hire people for the competence. I don't hire people for gender or for whatever it is. Or, you know, I don't see disability. I don't see nationality. I don't see gender. And even though those terms and those sentences have very, very good intention, they put people, you know, in this equality. Everybody's equal. Everybody's a human being. They also have a little bit of a very naive point of view, because not only naive, but also that you strip personality from people if you see that you don't really see them as an American, as a person with special abilities, as a woman, as a person of color, because their experiences shape who they are. In their experience, it's very, very different from your experience. If you're a man, experience of a woman is very, very different from experience of a man. The way the society treats her, the way she has to work, the way it's a burden, the biological. Same as race. People with different race have very, very different experiences. And even though for you, it might seem that everybody is the same, is pretending that things like as discrimination and racism don't happen. It's ignorance, number one, and it's not wanting to see the reality. So even though the intention is good, the result of it is not very good. So please don't be colorblind, because we are all different, and it's not enough to say they're all the same and they're all equal. So one thing I would like to point out straight away, as you mentioned in the very beginning, that Germany also has exactly the same problem, exactly the same challenge. The problem with Germany is that Germany doesn't really talk about it. There is no mention, because, because of the ugly past, that anything is racist associated is Nazi. So you kind of pretend that you're all the same, that you don't really have racism here. And I'm not a German myself, and as an outsider, I could see these differences as well. And I'm very privileged. I'm white. I was born in Moscow. I grew up in New Zealand, so I have a New Zealand passport. And I'm more of an expat here than migrant, as someone else will be here in Berlin. And for you just to dig into that straight away, it's too important to understand the term of third culture kids, or the first or second generation of migrants. So you all know the hashtag #MeToo, but here it's spelled very differently. #MeToo is a hashtag was presented by a German community of the first or second generation of migrants, when they're torn between two cultures and two personalities of themselves. So you're not really German, but you're not really Turkish, not really an Arab, you're not really a German, but you're both. So #MeToo is a very interesting hashtag for all of you. If you speak German, you can also translate that, going to Twitter and hearing the stories of racism, discrimination, as well as being culturally lost. Where are you as a person? So very, very interesting to explore. So I would like to point out in the very beginning what kind of attitudes are there towards racism, and it's a very, very challenging topic, and it's very difficult. And trust me, for me, it's also very, very talk about and to be here. The first explanation is, apathetic. I'm not a racist. No, everybody else is a racist. I'm not a racist. I'm a good person, not like those other white folks in US, in Texas, whatever there is. Yeah, so you kind of pretend that it's somewhere else, somewhere far away. And then the second one is non-racist. Non-racist is, well, I have brown friends, I have black friends, I have Asian friends. It's okay, it's fine. I go to protest. I really went to protest. I changed my Instagram picture to black. I did write a very long post on LinkedIn and Facebook about how much I hate racism, how horrible it is, and police brutality is so bad. This is non-racist. Anti-racist is something that takes you to a different level. Anti-racist is when you listen to minorities. You listen a lot, but you become an ally. You become a person to speak in white privileged spaces. Because when someone of a minority goes to white privileged spaces, let's put it this way, and talks about racism, like, well, don't talk about racism. Not everybody is a racist if you're brown. This is a very, very strong comment, but it's very frequently heard. But as a white person, you can do it a lot more. And it's once again, it's not easy to talk about it. And I would like to show you a very interesting graph created by a friend of mine. I will send you all the slides later. You might not be able to see everything clearly, but it's very, very important to see the scale of racism and to see the level of racism. So, you know, obviously we have, you know, extremism, you have supremacy, and over racism, and then subconscious racism, and then you have justification that, you know, I just don't like ghettos, it's all horrible. Well, if all these migrants would have done that, that would have been better, they wouldn't have such a bad rap. Or you talk about something like, you know, like slavery happened and 200 years ago, so it's not really, it doesn't happen anymore. And then the next step then goes to denial. I don't see color, you know, it doesn't exist, it doesn't really matter, we're all the same. Or you talk about things like, how am I privileged if I'm poor? You know, I'm a white person, but I'm poor, so I'm not privileged. And then the next interesting part is when you have a white savior, which, you know, once again has very good intentions, but it doesn't, oh, excuse me, it has good intentions, but it doesn't bring anything good. It's a white savior. It's like, I'm helping you, I'm going to protest, I'm an amazing person, I'm going to Africa to go to orphanage and have all these poor African kids and then post pictures on Instagram. I'm a good person, it's good for me. And then the woke justification. You know, there is no need for people of color to have their own safe spaces. We're all the same. Why do they need to have, why am I, as a white person, don't have my safe space, and why do people of color have a safe space? You question that. And you question things like, well, I'm white, what can I do about it? Sure, I was born that way. Am I supposed to feel guilty for I'm white? You know, this is kind of justification. You keep looking for excuses. And then you realize that, okay, yes, my life as a white person been hard, but it's not as hard as someone who is poor and a person of color. So you kind of, you know, okay, so, well, it's bad for me, but what if I've been in someone else's shoes? And then you become an ally, and then you become in compliance, which is a completely different level. So I would say this graph, it's a very, very good representation of what is happening with racism, what kind of scales are there. And we have very information heavy event today. And I'm going to skip through a lot of slides today. I'm going to really, you know, maybe overwhelm you with a lot of materials, a lot of resources, but don't worry. I have created also a LinkedIn group for everyone to join, and I will be sharing all the resources and then having a discussion for everyone to share and to look into that, because this event, the material we put together could have been half a day workshop. So it's just scratching the surface at the same time. So there are a couple of terms I would like to discuss as well. It's the types of racism. So the first one is internalized racism. Internalized racism, it's more like a conscious or subconscious thought that perpetuates the false idea that white skin and everything associated with that and values are superior. So it's very, very internalized. It's a completely extreme level. It's very direct and very seen. So those are the private manifestations that are inside of a person themselves. So inside the individual. And then we have interpersonal racism is, well, I'm not really racist, but this person is bad, and I have a skin color that is different from mine, and I'm going to be racist towards them. So it's more between individuals, and it's becoming more of you know, selected racism, so to say, if I use the right word for that. Institutional racism, it's more subtle. So the down you go, the more subtle is. There's more kind of not seen. You might pretend that it's not there, but it's there. It's very much there. So institutional racism occurs within and between institutions. It's a discriminatory treatment, unfair policies, and unequal opportunities based on race, perpetuated by schools, mass media, health institutions, so on and so forth. So basically, it's everything about power. It's who has the power. And we're going to talk about power a little bit later during our panel discussion, but who has the power? Who has the power? And this person and these institutions has the right to choose and discriminate. and for disadvantaged people and more advantaged people. And then structural racism, or sometimes called systemic, there's some difference between that. So it's even more underneath. So it's even more subtle. It's even more between the lines. It's more unseen. So it lays underneath all around and across society. It's history. So it's political system, it's history, it's kind of underneath the surface. It provides the foundations of white supremacy, and it also culture, which exists all around us, and interconnected institutions, which is key relationships, and so on and so forth. And you know, when I did my research, when I've done my research, while preparing myself for this, I was quite amazed about all of you German speakers and Germans would know that what's it called, pipi Strumphosen, yeah, the way it's, when you look at it, when you look back at that, it's you know, there's some racist things there in terms of it's a child story, but the way people of color were presented was not in a racist way, but in a negative way. So it already kind of plants a seed inside of you. Yeah, so those are the basic terms. And as mentioned before, I'm going to send you a lot of materials, a lot of resources, and very, very interesting things to dig deeper into that. So I think the most important thing is to understand the main difference between being non-racist and being anti-racist. And there's a beautiful, beautiful quote. In a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. You must be anti-racist, by Angela Davis. She's one of the early activists and still very, very prone in activism and Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth, and for the rights. So what can we do? I had a conversation with some of my friends, and one guy friend of mine told me, well, Ola, you know, it's so very nice and very beautiful what you do. It's so brilliant, but you know, what can I do? You know, why do I have to feel guilty for being white? You know, once again, there is a bit of guilt, but not guilt. Do I have to feel guilty for being white? Do I have to, you know, donate money to all this Black Lives Matters and all these institutions and all these NGOs? Why am I? Why am I supposed to do? I think it's just a very interesting question, and there is a term called also white fragility, the way you feel, the way a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking about this topic. And for sure, it's not easy to talk about it, but it's something that people need to talk about. And this point of denial, it's very, very strong, especially in Western societies. And it's a lot more subtle than there is, for example, in US. And I will show you why with the statistics that are going to be shown. And I have a story I'd like to share with you, and that was shared by one of my friends. She's an African-American lady that I know through my community, and she's quite pale, and she has beautiful, beautiful freckles. And she posted a story on Instagram recently, and then I really couldn't believe that. So, you know, the story, it's nothing new in Berlin. If you experience that, is that someone drunk in the evening started shouting at her in German. She's been living in Berlin for many, many years. She speaks absolutely fluent German. Starting shouting at her, using N-words, telling her go back to her country, telling her that she's not needed, she's not wanted here, that she's a horrible person, and so on and so forth. And, you know, she thought, well, it's okay, it's a drunkard, there are lots of idiots here. But what hurt her the most, it's not the words of this crazy stranger, it's the silence of everybody else on the train. People looking away, people on their phone, people putting the headphones on. Everybody pretended that it's not part of them. They have nothing to do with that. They don't want to intrude. And that's what hurt you the most. It's not the actions of this crazy person. It's the silence of people that could be your friends, could have been her friends or might have known her. It's the silence. And that's what allyship and being non-racist is all about. It's all about speaking up. And silence is being part of the problem. So let's talk about a little bit about even more difficult term that is called white privilege. We're not going to get into details just now due to the lack of time. But white privilege is a term that a lot of people don't like, and a lot of people don't find, find very discriminatory towards white people in a way. Like, why am I privileged? It's not about my privilege. It's all about your underprivilege. Yeah, so it's a little bit of kind of like going back and forth like ping pong. So the term white privilege really shows how when you're not a person of color, when you're a Westerner, that you have life experience in a very, very, very different way. And then a lot of people would say that life, everything in life is given on the plate for you. It's not exactly true, but it's always subtle little microaggression that happen to you on an everyday basis. It's not even about being murdered by police in US. It's not about being discriminated openly. It's all about this it's all about small little microaggressions that happen every day. It's about people of color being followed in a shop by security, just because. It happens in Germany, I've seen it myself. It's all about being rejected a house or an apartment despite a very stable and very good income in Berlin. We're gonna talk about it later as well. It's all about not being treated the same if you enter a very good university. Or because you probably got a scholarship, because people like you are supported. All these little subtle everyday activities and everyday little pins that people experience on an everyday basis. And I can't talk about it. I never had these things. I never been discriminated based on my skin color, because white skin color, this is seen as a default in a society. This is seen as a default, and you're used to it. I'm used to it. A lot of people are used to it, and anything that it's not white considered different. And it's once again very, very difficult to talk about and very uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about, but that's the reality. We're going to go more into discussion a bit later. So for now, what I'd like to talk about, it's more about history. I'm a bit of a history geek. I like history. I did a bit of research in how it all happened, just to understand what is the history of migration in Germany. So a lot of people I talked to, they actually didn't know that Germany is exactly the same as everyone else. It's a colonial country that had some colonies, predominantly in Namibia and Cameroon, Togo, and Tanzania, as well as foreign soldiers were stationed in Germany during World War II. And then 1955, 1973, there was a program started for Gastarbeiter. Yeah, so this is for foreign guest workers. So it's mostly people from Italy, Turkey, Spain, and Greece. There were a bunch of other countries that were part of that, but it was manual, unskilled labor for countries that didn't have enough jobs. And Germany at that time was really booming after the war. And then you need all these guest workers. But as the history has shown, a lot of these guest workers actually remained in Germany and didn't really, go back home. So it was for Federal Republic of Germany and GDR. It was Eastern Bloc, as well as Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Mozambique, and Cuba. So a lot of people, predominantly from Vietnam, stayed in Germany, in Eastern Germany. That's why you have all this beautiful Vietnamese food here in Berlin. That's one of the reasons. And then we have 1980s. We have humanitarian migrants coming mostly from Yugoslavia, when there was unrest in Yugoslavian wars, Romania and Bulgaria. So it was between 1980s and 1990s. There were lots of unrest in Southern Europe. At the same time, we have what happened in the 1990s, Soviet Union, Iron Curtain fell, and we have ethnic Germans coming back. There's a massive influx of anyone from Soviet Union that had any German blood. They were all not came back, they were probably born in Soviet Union, but they had some sort of connection with grandparents or parents, and they all came to Germany. In 2015, we have Balkan countries, Balkan unrest, and we have also Albanian Kosovo wars, and a lot of people came to Germany as part of asylum seekers or refugees. And also we have Syria, Iraqi, and Iranians being top asylum seekers in Germany as of today. So please don't be harsh. This is very, very big picture, not specific dates, but just as an overview what is happening. And by the way, you can ask all your questions in Slido. There is a function of questions as well. So please ask questions. We'll try to answer them at the end of our event today. And you can also upvote questions. And just for the sake of safety, safe space, you can be anonymous. So no need to put your name. That's one of the reasons I also disable Zoom for people to ask any question they want and without being named and shamed, if that's the case. So here we have a little bit of statistics here in Germany. So those are people with migration background in yellow and without migration background. So you might have thought, just like me, that Berlin represents the more people with migration background, but according to statistics, we have even more people in Bremen. Who would have thought? But it's considered both citizens as well as first generation and second generation, from what I remember. I can send you all this data and references later for you to see that I'm not making all these numbers up, but I find it quite interesting the way Bremen, Hesse, and Hamburg, a lot more. And here we have foreign population as of 31st December 2018 in Germany. So it's mostly frequent citizenship by country. So we have Turkey, we have Poland, Syria, Romania, Italy, Croatia, Greece, Bulgaria, Afghanistan, Russian Federation. Yeah, so those are the current, it's both for people who tend to register foreigners that have either permanent residency or citizenship, because Germany has changed the citizenship, the way you can have double citizenship just in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, those people who have either double citizenship or they have permanent residency here. So just a bit of an overview of what's happening. Moving on, 2018 migration status in Germany. We have 13.3 Germans with a migrant background and 12.1 foreigners. It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot, I have to say. Quite a lot. It's a very, objective opinion, but I didn't expect to have so many. Oops, I'm trying to get someone into the event and I click something different. Anyway, so that's the current overview of where Germany stands today. Yeah, and this is 2018, so a lot of things have changed for the past 2 years. Yeah, it's also quite interesting to see how the pandemic going to unfold, what's going to happen, and I know a lot of flats are free now in Berlin, at least a lot freer than before, because a lot of people went back home and gave up the flat, so it's a lot easier to find an apartment now. Well, not easier, but relatively easier. Moving on. That's what I want to focus on at the moment. Please read it carefully. And I would like to point out at something that I find extremely important. So once again, what do you think about this? Is it a great, wonderful quote by this wonderful man called Simon Patrick? Sounds lovely, isn't it? So what happens in Germany is that compared to a lot of other countries like US and UK and Australia, Germany doesn't have any statistics when it comes to minorities, when it comes to counting how many people of color, how many BIPOC people are there in Germany. And because you kind of want to pretend that racism is not here. Because once you start counting, you will unfold some demons. You will open a can of worms. And by the latest, so there is no census per se. There is no census at all in Germany when it comes to statistics in a sense. And there is a movement of NGO, non-profit, that tries to understand how many people of color, how many specifically Africans are there in Germany, and they approximate around 1 million. And you know, if you don't talk about these things, they become very subtle. You pretend the problem is not there. You don't want to connect it to your demons in the past. So I think this is one of the major problems when you don't really want to talk about these things, when you don't really want to address it. So if someone is not counted, what happens? They don't count. Yeah, so they're not really represented in the society, they're not really seen, they're not really heard. So if you don't count them, they're not really counted. And that is a major, major problem. There is one study that I would like to address. You might have heard about that. I will send you all the links later. So it's been on a train station, if I'm not mistaken, in Munich, but I might be mistaken. So you can see it's exactly the same lady, 3 pictures of her and a native control. So it's a field study. Long story short, how it happened, it's in the first situation, the 4 situations are exactly the same, but the way a woman dressed is very, very different. So someone drops a cup on the train station, and the lady either tells the person off, who's wearing a hijab or who's not wearing a hijab or wearing a cross, or not. And then 5 minutes later, she drops a bag and oranges fall apart and roll all over the station. And then what they measured, and then at the same time, she picks up her phone and starts speaking. One time she speaks German, another time she speaks Arabic, and then all the studies been measured against each other. And then we also have a native control, like a typical German-looking woman. So it was very interesting how they measured the perception and the actions of people who helped her, whether she told the person off through a cup, through a cup on the ground, not in a rubbish bin, or whether she was speaking German or she was speaking Arabic. Very interesting. So basically, they measured that they would help her a lot more if she was not wearing hijab, if she was wearing a cross, and obviously when she was looking very German, and then measured it against it. And as well, if she didn't tell a person off about the cup, they would help her a lot less. So you know what I mean? So it's like really basically people unconsciously help her only if they see that she's very integrated. If they don't see that she's integrated, they wouldn't really help her. So it's quite interesting. I will send you all the results later and all the study. I don't want to focus on that now, but it's very interesting to see the field study and where discrimination, racism happens on everyday basis. And then we also have an interesting study. It's called Hannah in Ismail. It's quite famous. It's basically all the requests for an apartment being sent in different cities in Germany, and they were more or less the same. So the men and women, the same age, the same education, the same salaries more or less, but depending on how your name sounds, even if you speak perfect fluent German, you will be rejected based on your name. So basically, if your name sounds Arabic or Turkish, Polish, or Italian, more for male than for female, which is quite interesting, and as expected, you'll be more discriminated against. So you're more likely to not get an apartment or get a house or whatever you want. So in this case, it was very interesting. I will send you once again all the study to get into that, just providing a little bit of data. So with this in mind, we have uncovered some basic terms. I know it's very, very rushed, and I keep looking at time because I promised my lovely speakers, my lovely supports to be on time, and I'm pretty proud of myself that I'm more or less on time. So now we're going to have the second part of our presentation today. We're going to have more of an interview and stories, which I would like you to support, and if possible, if you can turn your camera on, will be really, really appreciated. I can't see any of you because I have the speaker view only, so I see myself. I don't want to record any of you, but if you will turn your camera on, if possible, would be really, really appreciated for our speakers, because they're sharing personal stories and their experiences, so it'll be wonderful. Thank you. So, Nina Dinya, where are you? I will stop sharing. Okay, lovely, 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 lovely. I will unmute you, Dinya, because I see you muted yourself. Cool, lovely people. So who are you? How are you? How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I can start. I'm nervous, a bit tense, excited. It's a mix of feelings. Who am I? First, probably my name is Dini. I am an Indonesian who moved here to Germany 8 years ago, 2012, as a student. I've been living here, working, studying, yeah. And today speaking about you about this very controversial topic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being brave and for approaching me, first of all. I find it very challenging to approach people, so you did that. Thank you so much. And Min.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me too. I'm very, very happy to see so many new faces tuning in right now. It really helps. It makes a difference. So hello to all the new faces out there. Yeah, I'm Ming. I'm German. I grew up here in a little village close to Wilhelmshaven, which is in Lower Saxony. I studied in Bayreuth, in Hamburg, in Moscow, and I will start as a teacher soon in Berlin. As a student, I was involved in many projects, research projects around multilingualism, and we worked with educators in schools, at kindergartens, and on government level, and it was all about linguistic diversity. And this is a topic that I'm very engaging with and I really like, and also a topic that is kind of an indicator for racism as well, because when we talk about languages, often we also, I mean, we might talk about the Turkish speaking, Arabic speaking people, but actually we also talking about the people themselves. And yeah, this is a area where I've been involved in.
Thank you, thank you. And one fun fact about Min, he probably speaks better Russian than I do. Really, really impressed. Back in Moscow, when I was working in Moscow, we met at German Toastmaster Club. And then we had, he was my tandem German-Russian exchange, which is really fun.
That was fun, yeah.
Cool. So I have several questions for you folks, and feel free to go either one by one or to volunteer to answer this question. Go for it. So the first question is, where is Germany when it comes to diversity inclusion? The question of race seems very subtle here and not really addressed in media or in public until now, probably. And why is that so? Zinia, what do you think?
I can mainly talk about diversity and inclusion in corporate setting because my background, I worked in HR, I focused in people development. So in this regard, I would say still at the very early stage, because there is a study published in 2016 by the German Charter of Diversity that says only 1/3 of German companies have actually implemented diversity measures in their company. And only 19% of German companies are planning to implement something. So it's 4 years ago. I hope they implemented indeed this 19%. I don't know. There is no update in this report. And what I also observe is that when a company starts talking about diversity and inclusion, they start with gender diversity, or they only focus on gender diversity. All other aspects of diversity, like age, physical abilities, sexual orientation, religion, national ethnicity, it doesn't come into place. Some companies say that it's not, like, company doesn't play any role in this regard. In the other regard, like they like the safe topics. And to your question, why? I mean, I myself am not an expert in diversity. I'm not like a researcher in this topic. I'm just like more in the side. And then for me, so what I'm saying is more for my personal observation. I would agree with you when you say the history kind of plays a role in this. The fact that Germany has such a dark history in racism is like a knife with, both sides. On one hand, you are very sensitive about racism, you are aware of it and the danger of it. On the other hand, it's also, as I said, a very sensitive topic. The term racist is reserved to neo-Nazis and extremists. Being called as a racist, or being when someone called you out and say, oh, that's racist, you take it as a personal affront. And it's like, and it shut down the conversation. So it's taboo and uncomfortable. It's not something that you talk about with your colleague during lunch. I only talk about this kind of topic with colleagues that I'm feeling really, really comfortable with, or with close friends. And and it's just a difficult topic to talk about in general.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Min?
Yes, I agree to a lot what was said already. I would be still a bit more positive, optimistic even. So maybe it's my personality too, but I see that in Germany things are changing. People are addressing this more and more, and we have this very unique history, obviously, which, as you already said, Dini, it has this very contradictory paradox effect. On the one hand, racism is really forbidden; it's a no-go. No one wants to be racist. On the other hand, that makes it so difficult to talk about the inequalities that we still face, that we still have. And there's this sociologist, Aladdin El-Mafalani, who coined this very interesting term of the integration paradox. So during the last, let's say, 3, 4, 5 decades, we have this guest workers, as you already informed us about. And obviously, these people, the first generation that comes here as migrant workers that are working in factories, it's very hard for them to really participate in the public discourse. But now, since they have children and grandchildren that live here in the second and third generation, people are not white, but are German, like legally, they have the passport, and they just feel part of the society, because which else society than if you grow up here? They raise their voice, and they are more and more visible in media and public discourse. And I find this very promising. And funny thing is that in this integration paradox, the successful integration of these people doesn't mean that society is more peaceful. It will mean, you will see it when you have more conflicts, because these conflicts arise because the people are brave enough to address the issues and to ask and demand things that they want. And this is what they're doing. This is what I see in my peer group and everywhere right now. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation, which is also just a part of this whole progress.
Absolutely. It's challenging the status quo, and anything that is different, anything that is new will definitely meet some sort of resistance, and people will obviously say in the very beginning, oh, why did we start it in the first place? We should have stayed as we are. But I hear lots of stories and read lots, done a bit of research of people, especially of Arabic and Turkish look of parentage, the way they've been, who are born and raised in Germany, or their parents been raised in Germany, that are told to go back home. And it's very, very painful, because you are German, you just don't look German. Where is this concept of, you know, the world is changing, the way you're not blonde with blue eyes to be German? And this, I think it's very, very difficult for people to accept, because it seems only, you know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, everybody was, you know, typical German. But now the look, you know, the globalized world is changing, and there is no typical German. Yeah, so it's I think it's very, very difficult for a lot of people to accept, especially with a generation of still people who were part of the Second World War. Yeah, interesting, very interesting, and definitely not easy to talk about. So what do you think, Min, is so difficult for?
Sorry, I think someone just raised their hand, so I would just say again that there's this what's it called, Slido thing, where you can enter your questions, and then we can just come back to them later, because I would really love to hear the questions.
Thank you because I can't see anybody. So
okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to have the open discussion now until the end, because we're recording that. Please, you could put all your questions in Slido, slido.com, sli.co. And then all the most upvoted questions are going to be answered at the end. And because chat is disabled for the safety space. Thank you, Min. So why do you think it's so difficult for both people of color or BIPOC to talk about race, and why, on the other hand, it's difficult for white people, let's put it this way, to talk about race, in whether there is a difference between those two?
Mm-hmm. Shall I start? So I should maybe just start with myself. So for me, as a person of color, that's a term, if not everyone is familiar with it, which shows that we're not white. And for me, it was not easy to talk about racism and race for a long time, because I grew up in a little village with very few people that looked like me. And I had a nice childhood. I was a happy person. I'm not saying that I was racially assaulted every day, but the thing is, people are very nice to me as long as I don't raise this issue. So it was like, you already talked about the internalized racism, which is a thing for everyone. So it took me quite a time to see the patterns, to see. I had to study social sciences and so on, and to go through this political education process to see that the experience that I have, they are systematic, that I'm not the only one, and that I'm not the only one who feels uncomfortable when he gets to ask where he's from, like every second day and at every bus stop, from people who are really we're not close to me. I mean, I don't mind this honest interest into my family history and biography, but it's very, if you don't talk about this, and then these people who are affected by racism, they don't have the voice, they don't have the language to talk about this as well. So this is why I think it's very important, very difficult for POC to actually find words for what is happening. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, now as I'm a student, I hold degrees, I can work on this topic professionally. It's easier to raise the topic. But if I'm in a deprivileged position, I can just get really clear disadvantages. People will try to, because I make them uncomfortable when I talk about it, people will try to silence me, people will try to get me out of the workplace in different contexts. So that's what makes it difficult to talk about it.
And why do you think for people, for white people, it's difficult to talk about it? It's changing the status quo, I guess.
I think the main issue is acknowledging privilege is so difficult. I mean, that's a thing that I have the empathy and I understand it as well, because I also have a lot of privileges as being educated, being male and blah, 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 being able-bodied, being a healthy person. And it's so difficult to really acknowledge that you benefit from a system that you didn't set up yourself, and you get to hear your whole life that this is a normal thing. It's normal that some people just get to have better lives if they are in a certain way. And acknowledging your privilege means that you have to, even though you didn't do anything for it and you didn't do it intentionally, but you benefit from it, whereas other people are deprivileged. And I think this is just very painful. It's not fun. It's not fun to talk about it. And it's because the emotional reaction would be usually shame. You go through this, there are this many stages, you go through, first of all, you're just really shocked, you cannot believe it, then you're just ashamed, you don't know what to do. And then at some point you just feel powerless, because when you educate yourself, and I see so many people nodding, which is nice. So I think many people already are kind of into that topic. But at some point you feel powerless, because you see the whole thing is so big and so historically rooted. And at that point, maybe it's just easier to give up and change the topic and think about nicer things in life, I could imagine.
Yeah, saying like, what can I do? I was born this way and there is nothing I can do. There's the whole world is like that. Of course, it's easier for sure. And it's stripping down. So basically when somebody tells you that whatever you achieved in life, it's not your hard work, it's not your effort, it's because of your skin color, because of you being a man, or you being able-bodied, or you being born into a privileged country. Not just about skin color. That's very, very painful. Very, very painful. And obviously the first reaction is to reject. You say, well, I worked so hard. But when all those people slacked off, I was working really hard. That's why I achieved that. But yeah, difficult, very difficult. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Jeannie, and do you have anything to add? Or we could move. Yeah, yeah, a lot to add.
No, I mean, I mentioned that probably just like a short story before I say why, because when I saw your post in LinkedIn, I'm like, oh my God, finally someone on my LinkedIn network said something about this, and then wanted to talk about this. That's why I was so excited. I messaged you right away and said, Ola, if you need anyone that will contribute to your story, I'll be there. I thought at first that it's going to be like a smaller group, or there will be a lot of people that will volunteer themselves, because I know I'm not the only one who has stories as a migrant. But then on Thursday, I think we talked, and then I realized that there are a lot of people who will be there. I will probably be the only one, because we didn't have Min at that time. I'm like,
what did I stand up myself to?
Why did I bring myself into this? Why would I share my personal story to a stranger and probably get prosecuted because I've experienced it? It's hard to tell your stories about racism, because first it's personal. It's something that you experience, and then most of them are not really nice. Talking about not so very nice experience is not something that you want to do, especially with a stranger. And then I have experienced being dismissed or being discounted when I bring myself into telling the story. They say, oh, you're just taking it personally, or it's normal, it happens to everyone. So, you either feeling helpless or you feel angry. So you either feeling, okay, probably it is like that, or you just know, this is my story, it happens to me. So you're either feeling those two things. And as a person, you don't want to feel these two things. You don't want to feel helpless, you don't want to feel angry. So I start telling myself that it's normal. you know, the Alltagsrassismus, the microaggression, the racial profiling, you start telling yourself that it's normal. It's part of being a migrant here in Germany. You just have to suck it up and live on. And then I catch myself telling, you know, there are a lot of new migrants coming to Germany, and I catch myself telling them, when they tell me their stories, I tell them, you know, it's normal. It's part of being here in Germany. And then I'm like, wow, I turn into a complicit. I am the one who is supporting the privileges, not because I want to, it's because most of the people who come here, they just want to live. I come here just to study, better my future, make my family proud. I don't want to feel helpless and angry the whole day. So I'm just like, it's normal. But, you know, once I caught myself that, you know, it's normal, like, oh, now I'm actually enabling this kind of behavior. And that's why yesterday I was like, okay, should I actually come to the call? Should I actually tell these things? Who am I? I'm not an expert in diversity. I'm not someone who is born here in Germany. But then I told myself, Ola is also not an expert. And she said, we are going to talk about this. So I just said, okay, I'm going to talk about this, even though believe me, I'm still a lot of nerves in my body. Just it's not a pleasant thing to talk about. And why is it hard for non-white folks to talk about this? I mean, explain it. I also mentioned it. It's uncomfortable. It's not something that you want to acknowledge that, yes, I am a complicit. I am part of the system. And I benefit from it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this. You told me some stories before, and from what I've heard as well when I talk to other people, that a lot of people, when they're not used to seeing someone like you, they're not used to interacting with someone like you, they might be either overly careful because they're afraid to offend you or to say something incorrect or culturally inappropriate, or the opposite way, they're just being inappropriate, like straight up in your face. But at the same time, a lot of these conversations are not very intentional, or a lot of remarks are intentional. And as Min mentioned before, it's like, you know, people asking questions, oh, where are you from? Where are you really from? Oh, so where are you from? Oh, you're Vietnamese. Oh, okay. Oh, you're from Ghana. Oh, you're from there. But you're actually German. Oh, you look so exotic. Oh, that's really beautiful. Oh, you speak such good German. All these kind of little remarks. So how when people express microaggressions unintentionally or intentionally, how do you usually react? Like, how do you communicate it to people in such a way that not to escalate it? Because obviously, if you would want to escalate every time, you would have to live with that a very difficult life. What do you have, like, any specific way that you communicate all this, educating people, so to say?
Mm-hmm. Interesting question. I think growing up here as a non-white person, as part of a minority, which is already very interesting enough to feel a belonging to a marginalized group, which I do. It gave me a very sensitive and very good sense of what people are trying to reach, what their goals are when they ask these questions. And I see many different motivations to ask questions, like, oh, where are you from? And so that's why I think in the last years, I got to learn to choose my battles, so to say, to be very, like, to save my energy with people where I see it doesn't make sense, to educate them, either because of their personality, because they are very far away, because my energy level on that very day, because of the context. It's different if you're one-on-one with a person that with whom you will you know you will spend a lot of time because it's a new colleague, for example, and compared to if you're out on a party and just want to have fun, and then you have this person coming across you. So that's why it really depends. But when I see people who are like genuinely interested and curious, but just oblivious about the effect that the question might impose on me, then oftentimes I would even then, I would even answer that question. And that's very important for me. It's just my personal strategy. It doesn't mean that I'm talking for everyone who's looking Asian or whatever. It's my personal strategy that then if I see this genuine curiosity, I'm okay to talk about it, and I answer the question patiently. But I will then also very like implicitly try to bring in this topic, or maybe later on I can like talk with that person if I feel like there's some connection, some emotional bond, so I can trust that that person will listen me out. I can explain to them how it made me feel. And but that's the important thing. I need to feel safe with that person, because what I, for example, experienced a lot. I used to sing in a choir in Hamburg, and I was the youngest person. So there were if someone's from Hamburg, it was in Altona. So very open-minded people who consider themselves very open-minded, and they are, so most of them were like around 40 or 50, and many of them asked these questions, and I could feel that they are very genuinely interested. And that's why I think I could like really slowly educate them somehow, but not with the goal of educating, but just to make myself understood, which is usually my goal.
Yeah. I would imagine it would be also very difficult if, answering these questions on the same questions and the same remarks all the time, that you have to explain yourself. But you have to be very patient for that also. Yeah.
And sometimes, of course, I mean, that sounds like I'm the most patient person ever, but sometimes I'm just really annoyed, and I just tell them like, I'm from here. And then if they look at my face and I'm like, but then I just ignore it and wait for them to be explicit or to drop it. I mean, there are many ways to deal with that.
Yeah. I know how you feel, because when people are like, oh, you're Russian, but like, no, but I'm not Russian enough, but I'm not New Zealand enough to be either of them. I'm kind of stuck in between. People are like, but you look Russian, you speak Russian, you're Russian. But I grew up in New Zealand. It's very different, but it's like, whatever, yeah. It's like, and at some stage you just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, these moments you really see how these people, they struggle to fit you into one box, in one category.
Thank you for saying that. It's so difficult for people to like, but you don't fit in this box, but can I put you in this box? And they're like, you don't fit there either. Like, and people.
Thanks for trying.
Yeah, thank you. Dina, what about you? Do people ask questions that, anything related to the headscarf that you wear, or religion, or Ramadan, all those kind of questions? I would imagine that people probably might ask if you have an experience having to explain it on a regular basis, or what's situation for you like?
I would say I don't know whether this is good or bad, but I'm quite tolerant of microaggression or inappropriate comments. I think it's also because I'm not German, so question like, for example, where are you from? For me, it's a legitimate question. I'm not from here, so I can answer it. Indonesia. Or when someone said, oh, you speak very well German, I said, thank you. I said heart. Thank you for acknowledging that. And or question about like, oh, are you a Muslim, or what? Like, people don't really ask those things at first, not in the first place. But I would really agree with what Minh said, that as corny as it sounds, what's in your heart counts. Like, if in your heart it's pure curiosity, it's pure, I just want to know. Maybe you even formulate your sentence in an offensive way, But I would catch that as someone who receives this question so many times in my life. I would catch the difference between when you ask me whether you are curious and you want to get to know me better, or you're just asking to troll me or to start an annoying discussion. And so, yeah, for me, microaggression, racial profiling, I always get controlled at the border. In the train, I would be the only one who get asked, what's your passport? Where's your ID? I always have to allocate a longer amount of time in airport, because I know no matter how beautiful I pack my backpack, no matter how simple I dress, I will always get stopped. That's just part of life. And sometimes, you know, some of these things, it's security. I don't want them to loosen it up. But of course, it would be nicer if you don't have to, you know, if you already pack everything according to all the T's, you cross all the T's, you dot all the I's, but you still get stopped. But for me, it's just like part of life. What bothers me is when people aggressively attacking me, you know, like, you effing Muslim, you go back to your country, experienced it. Or when people just, you know, when people say this thing, I usually checked out. My brain process the words. I still do hear this thing, but it's my brain just check out. And then once I get the time to gather myself and in a safe space, I then, I don't know, either cried or just frustrated. But it's rare. I would say 8 years here in Germany, 3, 4 really major racist attacks that just make your heart, your body still boils until today when you remembered it. But I would also agree with the Martin Luther King's quote when that you say, I don't really remember all the things that they said, like these racist people, because there's just horrible things. But I still remembered there was one subtle racist thing that a professor said in the classroom. And I still remembered how none of the student in the class was actually able to stand up and say, hey, what you just said or what you just did was racist. Nobody said that. Only after the class, I talked to another people of color in the class, and I said, is it just me, or what he just said and did was racist? And she was like, yep, maybe we were the only two who catch that, but that was racist. But, you know, I still remember, like, how are these people who I called friends not able to say something? But yeah, microaggression, yeah, as I said, I don't know whether it's bad or good. I just get used to it.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's good or bad either, because, you know, once again, as we said in the beginning, like, it seems that the racism in Germany is very, very subtle, because it's kind of like, you know, Germans are very direct when it comes to negative feedback. It's kind of like, you know, from an intercultural perspective, it's like, you know, this is shit. But when it comes to this kind of thing, it's very subtle, it's very decoded. So if you it's for a person that can decode it, not for everybody else sometimes. Sorry.
Yeah, can I add something on that question of how we are dealing with microaggressions? Because as for me too, I think I'm very patient, and I can deal with it somehow. And also you, Dina, you just have other things to do. As you said, you want to work, you want to, you know, you have other goals than pushing for political change in Germany or something. But what I find very important to stress is that there are people who are bothered, who are suffering from that. And like having us telling, like, honestly, for us personally, it's more or less okay. But then there are other people for whom it's not okay because of many different reasons. I mean, you can listen to these stories that these people tell. And I find it very important to not use it to delegitimize their opinions. I mean, as a person of the majority, you should ask yourself, like, am I really, I know that it's kind of insensitive, but as long as I have one person of color who says it's okay for him, so then I can just keep on and carry on and doing this, or maybe it should be the first person that tells you that it's not okay. Then maybe it should be the moment for you to reflect on whether you want to keep doing this and that. Yeah, just a thought I wanted to add.
Thank you. I think that's a very, very good point. You know, not finding an excuse because I have this friend and he or she told me it's okay, but yeah. And that brings me actually to my next question.
Coincidence.
I really like, I really like what you said about, you know, people who have it worse, so to say, you know, probably, you know, I would assume, and it's not probably correct, but like a Muslim man will have it worse than a Muslim woman, or maybe it's the same. But what I would like to challenge and ask you is, both of you have Asian features. And I assume from the perspective of a German society, it might be that you will carry less danger from being a migrant, from being a newcomer, than someone who's Black or who's an Arab. Do you think the experience of those people will be different, or would they have it worse? I'm not sure whether you can compare racism and discrimination, whether it's better or worse. And it's a very challenging question, but what do you think about that, Min, since we're already discussing that with you?
Yes, actually, I think it's really, really dangerous to compare, as you say to yourself. And the reason is, first, if you compare pain, then okay, no, let me start from a different perspective point. I'll just come back to that. Yes, we as Asians, or people who are perceived as Asians, we benefit from this model minority myth. Let's say the Asians are hardworking. We have, some years ago, Thilo Sarrazin, SPD politician, who wrote this racist book, where he put them in the hierarchy, the migrant groups. We have the Vietnamese, people from East Asia, Indians on top, who are well integrated economically, and then Muslims on the bottom. And the problem with these kind of things or thinkings is, first of all, it really silences the very underestimated anti-Asian racism that we have. Maybe some of you have heard of the stories about Asian-looking people were being assaulted on the streets in the last weeks because of Corona. Yeah. Because some media outlets would portray it as an Asian or Chinese disease, and people who have never been to China in their life would being openly attacked on the streets, being pushed away, being spit on, and many bad things that happened to them. And so anti-Asian racism is real as well, and also having positive prejudices doesn't help. It doesn't make, I mean, it's still just stereotypes and prejudices. It doesn't help me in a way to be seen as a person, an individual. And then the second aspect is that it's really this trap that we, as people who experience it not as worse as other groups, we kind of lose empathy and solidarity for them. So it becomes like a competition, who can be the best migrant. And many people it's very tempting to fall in this trap. When people talk with me about migration, because it's also my major, and I talk about this. I mean, I can talk about it very lot, and people are talking, and then they say, but then, you know, the Muslims or the Arabs, the refugees, or name any group. And this is really oftentimes the point where I have to say, stop, wait, this is not, I'm not your complicit here. This is not where I want to join your discussion on why these groups are worse than other groups. Yeah. So that's my point.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very, very interesting to reflect and to think about, because it will be quite interesting to learn about this book, because I haven't heard of that. It's like hierarchy of migrants. And yeah, definitely the model migrant, it's, yeah. We have just a little bit of time left, and I have two last questions that to address the current situation and to become more kind of practical. So in my experience, I had for the past few weeks, a lot of companies coming to me, because I have a large community of people and I work in diversity inclusion, and asking very interesting questions. Number one is, whether I know any people of color that were looking for a job.
Suddenly.
Yeah, that would like to hire it. And I find it, okay, that's not how you. And the second one is, can I do diversity inclusion training for them? Which on one hand, sure, it's very good, sure, pays my bills, and I love doing that. On the other side, on the other hand, it's very like kind of putting a bandage on the problem, because if you have 2-3 day diversity inclusion training, but your core company structure is not very inclusive, you know, no one will be able to help you to do that. You need to start from very. So the thing is that a lot of companies actually ask me as well now, like, look, Ola, we have a US branch, we all over the world. Should we address the problem in our official announcement, what is happening in the US? But what if you don't have US office? Should we still address it? Should we even talk about it? Or is it completely non-relevant because you don't have any people of color in our company? So I'm just curious about your perspective, Dini and Min, in terms of should companies address the current situation, or it will be seen as jumping on a bandwagon like everyone else and, you know, doing it just for promotion and being painted nicely?
So for me personally, silence is not an option. So I, as a person of color, I do pay attention to which company who actually put out a statement. This might sound like ridiculous, but for me, you know, a quickly made statement is better than not saying anything at all. It's about taking a stance in the situation. It's about putting yourself in the correct side of the history, let's say. And then jumping on a train wagon. What's so bad about jumping on a train wagon that is against racism? I mean,
Fair enough.
Jumping on a train wagon that's heading to a crash, it's bad. But jumping on a train wagon against racism is a good thing. And then also to the question, like, yeah, but we don't want to look hypocritical. Then don't be hypocritical. Take it as a point, as a company, you know, put out a statement, and then look inside in your organization before you being called out by a customer. Because I think L'Oreal or something, they put out a statement against Black Lives Matter, and one of their models or I don't remember, but you know, one of their model called them out and said, hey, you kicked me out of your campaign because I was outspoken in this topic. So, you know, well, bad for L'Oreal, but you know, it's a moment. I mean, if you don't want to look hypocritical, put out a statement, look inside, start discussing with your employees. Hey, have you noticed actually anything? Did we miss anything? Is there anything we can do? And then take that point as a starting point to make more programs, set up more budget for diversity, provide a platform, facilitate a discussion in your employees. And then you start inside out, and then your customer will hear about it. And, you know, if you're being called out, then it's a wake-up call. Yes, you did something wrong in the past. Now do something good. So I would say,
nice. Everyone, diversity inclusion trainer. Wonderful. No, I think I really, really like that. Because, yeah, I think it's also, for me, I work with companies that I see that can commit. Because if I see somebody just doing diversity just for the sake of, you know, one of our employees asked us and we didn't say anything, okay, fine, we'll have 3-hour diversity training just to shut them down. This is kind of like backfires even worse within the company. But for someone who really wants to commit, and it's a good starting point, absolutely. Very good. Maybe if not to start now, then when? What else needs to happen in the world for you to embrace inclusion and talk about this? Thank you. Thank you.
It reminds me to whatever a gun shooting, terrorism happened in the US. People start talking, yeah, let's not talk about it now. It's time for thought and prayer. That's the same thing. No, use the moment to do something.
Yeah. That's why we have these events that will be spread the love and spread the knowledge. And the last question. But I have some Sorry. What advice would you want to give to people that would like to support BIPOC community or minority groups, and how they should approach the topic and what they need to avoid doing? Because a lot of people seem to be very interested in doing that. A lot of people have good intentions, but sometimes the intentions don't have the good consequences. How should people who are not people of color or the minority groups need to address that topic? And what do they need to do to become non-racist and become allies? I mean,
well, there's a long list. Maybe we can do it together. I think my main advice would be to educate yourself. But to put it more practically, like how would you do that? I mean, of course, go to a bookstore and buy a book on racism, that's fine. But maybe you can start with little steps too. I mean, what I find really interesting, interesting task to do, activity to do, is to look at your Facebook feed or your social media feed, if you're a Twitter user, Instagram, whatever, and just go through and like check how many people, like how much does this represent the country you're living in, or the district you're living in. Also interesting, very interesting, like to what kind of people do you even actually have contact? What kind of voices do you hear? How much can you relate to their lives? And if you, okay, then maybe you might come across that you don't have many Black or POC in your feed. And then you can just look for the very active, like online, how do you call it, these online activists that share very good educational content, because it's buying a book is sometimes so it's such a burden to actually start with it, and then it's so massive, one block of information, and you feel just very ashamed or whatever. And many friends that that went through this whole process together with me, they said that it was very good to have this constant reminder, kind of. And so, for example, politicians like Aminata Touré, the Green politician in Schleswig-Holstein, who's the parliament president there, she just, for example, maybe we can put it in some kind of show notes later, I can set it into the group. She has very nice political demands that are very clear, because not every POC, not every POC friend of yours is being able to have this perfect political statement of what he needs in order to strive in this unequal society. But they are politicians who try to make these visions and come up with really practical ideas, very, very practical and concrete demands how laws has to change. And you can educate on that, so that the next elections you can vote for this change. Because I think my feeling is we've been very personal here in this conversation so far, which is nice, which I really enjoy. But then you really have to step up the game. And so after the statement, the company statement, then look at the bigger picture and what is there to do. And there are people who are already engaging there, like NGOs and activists, and then just follow them, support them where you can, listen to their demands.
Thank you so much. I think definitely all those resources are going to be sent and distributed. So thank you very much. And Dinia?
For me, on a personal level, on an individual level, for me, there are three things. First, check your privilege. Second, listen. And the third is amplify. So check your privilege here. I was part of the privileged community. I come from Indonesia. Indonesia is the majority are Muslim. And you know, I'm also part of the biggest ethnic group in Indonesia. I'm part Javanese Malay. I'm relatively to them light-skinned. You know, I'm yellow. I turn brown when it's summer, depends. So I was part of the majority. And I have friends who are Christian, who are Hindu, who are Buddhist. But it took me a while after I come to Germany to realize that I was benefited a lot from becoming a part of majority. You know, white privilege here is used because you know, we are living in a white majority country, and most of the most developed world are dominated by whites. That's why the term is more known. But basically, it's just about privilege of being part of the majority of whatever country you were born in.
Mm-hmm.
So once I'm here in Germany and once I'm part of the minority, you know, I'm actually like, I'm a woman, I'm Asian, I'm a people of color, and I'm Muslim. It's something that's, I just found it out, it's called Mehrfachdiskriminierung, you know? So it depends whether someone wants to discriminate me because I'm a woman or because I'm an Asian or because I'm a Muslim, or usually it's just the three of them. Some of them don't really see, you know, it's not an either or situation, it's a compounding effect.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, checking your privilege was asking yourself, how did I benefit from this? How did I become part of this? There is a book that is called 28 Days Challenge of Me and White Supremacy, something like that. So it comes up from, there is an Instagram challenge started by a British Black woman, where every day you are posed as a white people, you can do every time, everyone can do it. You are posed with a question, you know, to checking your privilege, like in different aspects for 28 days. It's not a comfortable exercise because then you started realizing, oh yeah, like these are the things that I did, or these are the things that I think of other person. So, but checking your privilege, knowing how you benefit, it's also a way to understand how other people are being disadvantaged by this. You know, realizing the benefit that I received by being part of majority helps me to understand my Christian friend in Indonesia, my more dark-skinned friend in Indonesia. It helps me to reach out to them and say, hey, probably the thing that I said to you before, or the way I did things to you, it wasn't really comfortable for you because you are a minority. So that's the first step, like checking your privilege, check, like, you know, just like a thermometer, knowing how is the current situation. And the second part is listen to how you act, listen how to people around you say something, and most importantly, listen to what people of color are saying. I told you I get so many experience when people just discount it, or like not taking into account of what we say, of what I said, because it's uncomfortable. They say, nah, it's not really happening, you're just making it up. If you know me personally, I'm a super optimistic person. I hate people who have victim mentality. So when a person of color keeps saying that they are victimized in this society, it means they are. Just take it as on face value. And you know, it's also why I want to talk, because it's like Me Too. When more people talk about it, more people take it seriously. Because it's now like more undercurrent. I don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about it. Nobody talk about it. But if I feel like I'm being listened to, if I feel like, okay, you actually listen to me, you actually see my point, I'm going to talk more. I'm going to educate you more. Not even educate. It's not my job to educate you about racism. Educate yourself, please.
But the story and see the magnitude of problem, the situation.
Exactly. Listen to the story. And then the third one is amplify. When you hear these stories, share it with your friends, with your family. You don't have to be an activist. You don't have to go protest. Do everything that you can. Maybe you have a Sunday brunch, you bring it up. You address your racist uncle that you've known all the time that they are racist. I mean, I think my colleague is still here, Miriam. So shout out to her. I know, so with her, I felt really comfortable. She is, for me, the definition of white ally. So I shared to her a lot of my racist attack stories because I felt comfortable, because I felt that she is putting herself, even though I know it's uncomfortable for her probably to hear about it, but she listened to my story. And then I know that she went into fight with some of her family members because, you know, now when her racist uncle said something, she can say, you know what, I have a friend who is wearing a hijab. She said this and this. And I know she's like having fight with friends and family, but she speaks about it. And probably she's tired now by talking about it, but just knowing that she tried, just knowing that she used her privilege. You know, your privilege is also a good thing. When I say this, I might be seen as a, you know, angry or, you know, a victim, but when you tell the story, that's why I appreciate Ola for making the platform, because when Ola invited you to this platform, her voice, it's bad, but matters more to some people. But probably if I'm the one who shared it, people are like, eh, this is just going to be another people of color complaining about stuff. So use your privilege, use your power to speak about it. Start small. You don't have, as I've said, you don't have to be an activist, talk about it the whole time with everyone in your circle, but just start, because as I've said, being silent is supporting it. It's allowing it to grow and just happen. And, you know, if these voices, if these stories are being pressed for so long, you can wait for something happen like what in the US now happening. You know, they riot. Why? Because all the time they try to communicate it nicely. They try to kneel peacefully, but people just don't hear about it. So they riot. I really hope, I don't think Germany will come into that point. I hope that we won't, because, you know, dark history and all, but just take it as a lesson. And also, for me, another funny thing is when the Hanau shooting happened, there were some people protesting on the street, like 500,000 here in Köln. But when this George Floyd is happening,
yes,
so many people.
Exactly, I agree. I completely agree.
Many people just went to the street and protest. And for me, you know, it's good. I'm not complaining that people are protesting, but for me, it makes me question, like, I know it's easier to point finger and say, look, Americans, the bad ones, they're racist and stuff. But it says something about the society when the injustice that happened within your land is less hurting for you than the injustice that happened to someone far away, not even part of your society, actually.
Yeah.
So don't be like that. As I say, check your privilege, listen, amplify.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing all those beautiful stories and those wisdom of knowledge. I've learned so much. Our audience, I'm sure, learned so much. Really, really appreciate for all the people for 31 persons who is still here, to be with us until the end. We kind of ran over time, but thank you so much for sticking with us. Please send us, I'm going to stay here. If anybody would like to stay here as well, ask questions, more than welcome. I'm going to be here for a while, and I'm going to stop the recording. Please see us next week and the next 9 weeks, every day at 5 p.m. on Tuesdays, to talk about different types of diversities. We're going to talk about LGBTQA, we're going to talk about neurodiversity, we're going to talk about how do you work in a multicultural team, and so on. So we're going to talk about talk about microaggressions and inclusion in the times of pandemic. So a lot of very interesting topics. If you have any questions about diversity inclusion, how to help your company, more than happy to answer your questions. Just, you know, book a call or whatever. So once again, thank you so much. And please, if you like to donate, please donate. All the money going to go to companies that support diversity inclusion. So you can just get the next ticket and donate, and donations will be used in the